We're going to start with Colin, focusing on some of the key questions that aspiring entrepreneurs need to explore before starting a venture. Colin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You've flown down from Brisbane for this evening. Thank you for doing that. We appreciate it. Talk to us about Startup Onramp. Where did the idea come from? Why is it necessary?
So Startup Onramp's a training and mentoring program for early stage startup founders.
Yep.
And having been involved in the startup scene in Australia for more than a decade and having worked with lots of startup founders, it seemed to me that we were making a lot of the same mistakes again and again. And so having run incubators and accelerators and early stage funds that invested in startups, I kept seeing the same things going wrong and leading to failure of these companies. So it occurred to me that it would be really useful to have a crash course on how to start and to get it right. At the same time, I see lots of people who've got ideas for startups, and maybe they're working in a corporate job, and they would be awesome startup founders, but they never start. And I think for a lot of them, it's because they don't know where to start. So Startup Onramp is a crash course on how to start. It runs over 12 weeks. It gives a series of workshops, and we bring in successful entrepreneurs, investors, subject matter experts, and we mentor the group with the objective of getting them to a point where they can go and be successful as startup founders.
That's a fascinating 12-week window to get visibility and insight into. What are the main challenges that they come up against in that first 12 weeks? I imagine it's quite intensive.
The first thing is to be critical of your idea.
Yes.
Right? To be able to step back and be dispassionate and say, all right, I've got an idea for a business. It might be a bad idea.
Which is so hard for an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And, you know, it's never for me or anyone else to say your idea is terrible, you should not pursue it. Yeah. It's for them to go and understand by talking to customers. So the classic thing you see entrepreneurs do, particularly first-time startup founders, is they'll go and spend 100 grand and they'll get some developer to build a product and they'll keep it a secret and then they'll launch the product. And crickets. So a big part of what we focus on is saying, go and understand the problem, interview customers, ask them really good questions, and then work out what product you should build.
And is that, because there's obviously a balance, right? Entrepreneurs are quite independently minded, know what they want, can charge at an idea, but also need to be considered and thoughtful and analyse the risks and determine, you know, whether there is a consumer and market demand or not. How do you encourage them to sort of straddle those two worlds, if you like?
Yeah, look, it's challenging. If someone's very good at selling and they come from a sales background, they tend to go into those discussions selling. And these people need to be told or reminded that you need to go and listen. You need to go and understand the problem and find out whether your idea actually solves it. Then you get the people who aren't good at selling and they're more of the product people. They need to be encouraged to go and have the conversations and be able to get in front of a customer and be able to say, well, this is what we're doing and test their thinking.
I like that. They are two very distinct different people. So talk to us about some of the success stories that you guys have seen through Startup Onramp.
Yeah, so it's early days for us. We've been running for about 2 years, but already we've seen a few companies come through the program that I think are going to be hugely successful. One in particular, a company called SurePact, which is a software tool for project managers who are managing large infrastructure projects. And it was started by a lady called Megan Avard, who has an extensive background in project management and managing large, complex infrastructure projects. And she realized that you could actually save a lot of time and save a lot of money by more closely managing the riskiest parts of the project. And so what our software tool does is basically identify the riskiest parts and help you, if you've got $1 billion spend, help you to save a 10 million or a 50 million or $100 million overrun.
Wow.
So they're on their way to greatness.
Right. And Colin, startup statistics when it comes to early stage businesses are often quite daunting. What are they? How does it look these days?
It is daunting. We know for a fact that more than 90% of startups fail. So do you want to do a startup? Most of the ones that fail for predictable and avoidable reasons. So I think if you said, look, let's short circuit that learning curve and not make all of those rookie mistakes, the odds of success are actually pretty good.
Right.
Particularly if you have a founder who has deep insights. So what I've seen is that people who come from industry and who have some experience, and there's this phrase of marinating in a problem. So if they've marinated in a problem for 5 or 10 years, they deeply understand it, and I think they've got a really good chance of solving it. And I think that's one of the things that we lack in Australia, is an understanding that actually if you have a really good problem to go and tackle and you get a little bit of help along the way, you actually have a really good chance of succeeding.
I love that, marinating in a problem. It's so incredibly important. You said that they fail for predictable reasons. What can you give us 2 or 3 of the most predictable reasons that you see?
Sure, there's lots. So the classic one is building products that nobody wants.
Yeah.
And so you see people who will spend their own money and they'll keep it a secret, and then they'll launch it and nobody buys it. Related to that is the concept where you see a lot of aspiring startup founders with an idea, but they're very protective of it. They don't want to tell anyone in case someone might steal it. And in 20 years of working with startups, I've not seen a single instance of someone stealing another person's idea.
Me neither.
So ideas are cheap, right? And if someone else is better positioned to go and pursue your idea and make a success of it, well, then they should do it. You know, and it says something about you as the founder if you're not the right person. So that's another really classic one. Probably the third one would be people trying to raise money from investors before they've got any evidence that there's a business. You see this all the time. People pitching really not much more than an idea to an investor saying, can you give me some money so I can go and build a product and then give it to some customers and see whether it's any good? Investors don't do that. They invest in businesses where you've got some early traction, some early customers. So we, in our program, we work very closely with the founders to say, let's help you get that early traction. Let's help you sign your first few customers, because customers are the only truth.
Colin Kinner, founder of startup Onramp, thank you so much for joining us on Entrepreneurs.
It was a pleasure.
We appreciate it.